Welcome back to Definitely Not Definitive. I'm Ken.
And I'm Bethany.
We're just a deadly duo in love. The lovers reacting to some Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, we do, but I'm really scared for this one.
Yeah, so this is some lore for Dead by Daylight, the Doctor lore.
Ooh.
Yeah, by single player Nacho, and Bucky's ready for that as well. It's not gonna be scary. Don't worry. Don't worry. I know. If you want all of our Dead by Daylight reactions, check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there for you. And because it's Dead by Daylight,
we have a drink.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Our homemade sangria for Dead by Daylight.
Killer hookup.
Yes.
Cheers.
Okay.
Are you ready?
No.
Alrighty, what's up guys? Single player Nacho here, and we're back with another creepy lore video for the Doctor in Dead by Daylight. And well, you're in for a shock for how absolutely demented this man is and how he became an extreme psychopath, and yet a very brilliant scientific mind, though for all the wrong reasons. The Doctor is what happens when you get a little bit of poison in that apple. This guy is so sick. And I've covered a lot of sick people on this channel. The Doctor, also known as Herman Carter, was seen by many in the scientific community as an up-and-coming Nikola Tesla, if Tesla was really into torture experiments. I didn't want to do this to you guys, but here's a close-up of his face. It gives me approximately 1 million questions. The Doctor has a mouth-opening device that reminds me of one of those YouTube trends from 2016, as well as eye enlargers, so that he's always watching you. And those pupils are so dilated, it's gotta be crack. His skin is all bruised up from electroshock experiments he concocted himself. It's gotta be burnt skin, I mean, Jesus Christ. Cover it up. All in all, the Doctor has a lot of facial equipment, probably puts a good 10 pounds on his face, and this design goes hand in hand with Herman's obsessive, neurotic personality. His entire fit just screams, I want to make you suffer to the best of my abilities and brain power. It's just kind of funny to me that he also has a clean-cut suit with a sleeveless top, a little fucking crazy on the face, but then very clean down below. But it all fits in perfectly with the Doctor's contradictory nature. And most Dead by Daylight killers have very tragic backstories, but the Doctor chose his path. I think this is probably the first real serial killer that did not kill out of necessity or vengeance, which is also bad, but because he liked it. He liked the feeling of making other people suffer. So much so that he gained this maniacal laughter. Yeah, that's the stuff of nightmares. Could he have been saved? Is there a point in this guy's lore that could have been a turning point to avoid so many people's endless torture? Well, I guess the past is the past. And this is Herman Carter's The Doctor, Descent into Madness. It all begins in the small town of Michaelstown, Illinois, in the 1970s.
I know.
Herman was a very interesting child, and he
I don't know where
possessed
Michaelstown is,
qualities that other parents
That's
would
the actual place
beg
in Illinois.
for in their children. Herman was very intelligent, an outside-of-the-box thinker, and very inquisitive. Everything around Herman that breathed, he wanted to learn about it, but this quickly turned into an obsessive motive. Just learning or reading about something was not enough for Herman. He wanted to physically or hands-on pull things apart and reconstruct them. At first it was technology, and I'm sure this feeling led Herman to progress to more living endeavors. You would think that maybe it's all in the name of science. Brilliance cannot be impeded by feelings or morals. The bad thing is, this was Herman at age 5 through 10. This is not the type of mentality you want a child thinking. To make such rash decisions and putting themselves in charge of other living things, it's not good. Regardless, Herman Carter continued his somewhat maniacal research into his high school years. This is when his teachers started noticing his near-perfect grades and well-written papers. Herman would then publish his own psychology magazine, Partisan. Herman became a star around his high school. Unfortunately, this never humbled him, and that obsessive personality started knocking at the door, and then an opportunity arises. Herman, being the outstanding student with amazing grades, goddamn teacher's pet, is given quick access to a very prestigious school known as Yale, and he's assigned to Larry's Memorial Institute, along with other young scientific proteges. Something about Larry's building was curious to Herman, the smell of burnt flesh, and it felt very old. Nonetheless, he was interested. On Herman's first assignment, he already has a problem with the professor, Professor Blanchard.
Dr. Blanchard, bleeding heart Blanchard. He has no idea what real power is. Real power is freedom, true freedom. Freedom beyond the limits of ethics and morality.
Oh yeah, those are some pretty creepy thoughts already.
Yeah.
Dr. Blanchard gives Herman his first interrogation experiment, much to his delight. He could hardly contain his smile, of course. The experiment was simple. Herman was playing the bad doctor, another one of his classmates was playing the good doctor, and then 7 other classmates were playing as prisoners, and the 2 leaders had to interrogate the prisoners to get passwords out of them. So Blanchard leaves the students alone so that they can begin the experiment, and he is to return in 7 days.
And they're all dead.
So how are you gonna get a password from one of these 7 students? Well, Herman is the bad doctor, so he has more tools at his disposal, but according to him, they're not effective at all.
Bad doctor with a code. A list of do's and don'ts. Very limited. Too limited.
So Herman tries a very animalistic approach. He tries to yell at the students, and of course, this doesn't work.
Shout. Big deal. Tell me right. Shout again. It's all make-believe for him. I should smash his skull again with the secret word.
Oh, substandard mediocre brain.
Days and days pass, and the interrogation experiment is proving to be somewhat of a failure because the good doctor and the bad doctor have not gotten any of the passwords from the prisoners. And Herman, the bad doctor, is getting more and more frustrated at the good doctor. He's not liking his techniques, the way he talks to the prisoners. Herman thinks this guy is a little too soft. Little by little, the interrogation becomes more prevalent. They wouldn't let the prisoners sleep, they'd starve them and dehydrate them, some basic functions of interrogation. And yet Herman was still sick of it all. He grew mad and lusted for brutal torture of the prisoners. It kept him up at night, knowing that those passwords were just a few shocks to the head away from being revealed. It made him lose his sanity. He would laugh at the images in his head, images of bloodied teeth, gouged out eyes, the victims being the prisoners. Herman knew interrogation was no place for morals. This darkness gripped him, and he knew what he had to do. It was a normal day at the interrogation experiment. Prisoners just wouldn't cough up any answers, and the good doctor was, well, playing the good doctor and talking to them. When the bad doctor enters the room, the energy in the room starts to shift, and Herman beats his own classmate, the good doctor, with a blunt object. Blood splatters everywhere. His fellow classmates gasp in fear. Brain matter was all over the face of the student that was just being interrogated by the good doctor. This was not pretend time. Interrogation ended and the torture began. He lets out a laugh. He loves this feeling of control, this feeling of freedom. I wish I could tell you that the story ends there, but not for these prisoners. One by one, he ties them up, and their bodies become canvases for the doctor. He rips the flesh off of their faces in order to extract the passwords. They're all very afraid now. No more shouting matches. This is the real deal. And these were the passwords: New, Reich, Horizons, Fourth, Bird, and Kill. He got all of them by defiling his own classmates. So, experiment over, everyone go home, right?
No,
The
no.
interrogation experiment was supposed to last a week, and it's only been about 4 or 5 days.
You have the words. You win. We are done. We are done.
Herman smiles. He knows he still has time to completely fuck up these prisoners' lives, but he notices something else. The good doctor is still alive, even after that horrendous beating. And oh man, the ideas that flowed through the mind of the bad doctor. You have to understand, Herman's biggest inspiration is Lord Cragg, a scientist from the 50s who's very demented himself and definitely had more freedom with his experiments. He notes that Lord Cragg put his own child in a box for years as an experiment. Lord Cragg also specialized in lobotomizing people, basically means erasing their entire memory of themselves. And this was Herman's big idea. Herman would remother his fellow students, open up their heads, play around with their brains, and he forced his classmates to keep their eyes open as he looped disturbing and violent images and have them play different scenarios, have them play different people. And with the good doctor, he had a grand idea. Herman convinces the good doctor that the other students are actually Russian spies, and he is to kill them. This was, of course, to shift the entire blame of all this crazy torture away from the bad doctor so that he gets away scot-free. Herman was so in love with his experiments, and he was so smart, unfortunately, very manipulative. He wanted to control his entire fate so that when Professor Blanchard comes back to check on the experiment, it wasn't his fault. Very smart. The bad doctor hands the good doctor a spoon. This would be the killing weapon to be used against the other prisoners. Herman is somewhat amused by this. He'd never seen someone use a spoon to kill other people, but there it was. He successfully manipulated the good doctor into becoming the killer that Herman actually was. Job well done. And it's been 7 days, and the experiment week is over, and Herman knows his entire story. He's going to tell Professor Blanchard that the good doctor went psycho and killed the other prisoners. But Dr. Blanchard is not alone. He is joined with men in black suits, very formal-looking suits, and the professor confronts the bad doctor, Herman, and the good doctor, who's laying down on the floor with a spoon, bloodied spoon that is. Herman tells the professor the fake story, and Professor Blanchard says,
"We taped the whole
Yep.
thing."
Much to Herman's surprise, he did not see this coming. Blanchard's
'cause
men
who would've
quickly
gone this
arrest
long?
Herman Carter for good. Professor Blanchard approaches the good doctor, who is no longer himself. He isn't showing any signs of humanity, no emotion, no response, just staring straight into the floor with a bloodied up spoon. Blanchard is somewhat amused, and he mutters something to himself in German. And then the professor gets up, looks at Herman in the eye, and says,
Looks like you had your chance to make merry hell and took it.
Herman was absolutely confused.
I don't understand.
Yes, you do. You understand much more than the
Okay.
others.
Yep.
The
Because like you said,
cuffs are just for appearances.
why would he keep letting them go if they were gonna...
To a key awakening.
As soon as they
This
started to
is
go crazy, they
the
should have
complete
come in.
enabling of an up-and-coming madman. This child genius with an amazing brain fell into the hands of a deeply disturbing experiment that enabled him to explore his violent urges. Larry's Memorial Institute was not a scholarly program. It was a secret black site facility. The men that arrived with Professor Blanchard were not cops, but CIA agents. And this entire experiment that killed 7 students and completely damaged the life of the good doctor was more of a job interview for the sick, twisted mind of Herman Carter, who has now fully transformed into the doctor. And his reputation did not end there. He was now a fresh recruit of the black site facility for interrogation experiments. You know, they taped the whole debacle of the 7 students being tortured through electricity, so the CIA knew that Herman had a fascination for electroconvulsive treatment, and his reign of terror only began there. Patients, prisoners, anyone that Larry's Memorial found interest in was very afraid of the doctor. In fact, he was the most feared. None of these prisoners wanted to experience the bone-crushing shocks of the doctor's treatments. Hundreds went through that door, and they all disappeared. No one knew that this was actually a government facility. Very shady. Until one day, the doctor disappeared, and Larry's Memorial Institute was investigated because of the silence, and what they found was horrifying. Patients without brains, or no recollection of where they were, patients in vegetative states, sick surgeries, all in the name of science. Investigators reported their findings at Larry's Memorial Institute, and the government just shook their shoulders, erased all the evidence, and the institute was closed down for good. And when you're playing on that map, the Larry's Institute was home to many prisoners and patients' torment, all under the direction of Herman Carter, who truly just wanted to be able to go into the brain and control everyone he could. That was his main goal. I wonder if he achieved this goal through his trials. Would he be pleased, or would he just let out a laugh?
Let out a laugh.
And so that was a pretty sick tale of how exactly the Doctor was enabled to become the monster that he truly was destined to be. And now it's time for some trivia items, things that are pretty interesting that will add to the richness of the Doctor's story. And first up, we have the Discipline Class 2, a confidential folder. Inside this folder are one of the disciplinary procedures used within Larry's Memorial Institute on its patients. Of course, these were very sick procedures. The little quote says, "We re-educate our patients with the greatest care." What a bunch of bullshit. Larry's Institute are the real monsters here. Next up, we have a booklet of Carter's notes. The Doctor, during his research for Project Awakening, used electroshock therapies, but he also used hallucinations in order to get into the minds of the patient. The quote says, "I can see their disgusting illnesses, Herman Carter." You see, this is what I mean by throwing all the morale out the window. It shows that the Doctor would actually mix up the mind even more of these mental illness patients. It's pretty sad. Next up, we have another booklet of Carter's notes entitled Calm. Now this is pretty interesting. This actually soothes the patient's mind. But then a nice little spark causes the patient to go completely insane. Little quote here says, "Higher quality seizures trigger catatonia. At least it gives me peace for the time it lasts. Herman Carter." Just a very, very sick, twisted individual. Being in a catatonic state is no fun. Causes the patient to move uncontrollably for hours. And now Herman Carter is over here saying that he's pretty annoyed by this. It's like he's not the one that's going through it. He's just very sick. And the last item we have is the Iridescent Queen. This chess piece was actually formed by the fog, so this might have been after the Doctor was acquired by the entity. Now here's what Herman says about the piece. "Once we have established an effective method of treatment, we can focus on its efficient means of delivery." Ever the innovative mind, huh? Very smart and tenacious even. No matter how evil this item is, Herman Carter is enthralled by it to try to understand it. Goes back to his childhood of picking apart animal brains and whatnot. Well, here's my personal opinion and thoughts on the Doctor's story overall. And my first thought is this didn't have to happen at all. Now, that's not to say that his upbringing was showing symptoms of an insane mind. Whenever a child is playing with dead animals, it's not good. So
Always
maybe
bad
he
sign.
wasn't able to be saved or turn towards the light. But this fascination with science and shocking the shit out of people gave him attention. He started seeing that this was good through his high school years, brought him popularity, and when he arrived at Larry's, it was the perfect clash of ideas. Very disgusting ideas, of course. I just think that this was his fate, to have arrived at a place where he can fully explore all these torture treatments and experiments. The Black Site facility really just expanded his toolbox. And that toolbox
I think he's
contained a lot
gonna
of
be like
pain and
that no matter
murder.
what.
That's why he's a perfect fit for the Dead by Daylight universe. It makes me wonder, how long was the CIA watching the Doctor? When he was a child, writing all those papers? When he was at high school? It's kind of creepy thought to think about.
So the Doctor's lore was indeed quite terrifying and creepy, and yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as creepy as like his faces and the design of the character, but it was still very creepy.
So, two things really came to mind as I was watching this. One was we just reacted to Destiny, to a Destiny lore video. And Zavala has a great quote in there, which you can't see yet. It'll be fully available on YouTube in the future. You can see it now if you go to our Patreon. But Zavala says, you know, with great light comes deep shadows. I might be paraphrasing it a little bit, but that's the gist of it. And science is that thing. I mean, science, there is so much possibility to so much good in the world, but then you get something like this. And they also think of like the Nazi doctors in Germany in World War II and the Holocaust, and like some horrific things that are done in the name of discovery, in the name of science, but that have a total lack of empathy and humanity and even, I don't know, like just basic human ability to feel anything. And the Doctor very much reminds me of that. Like, he's so clinical. And doctors can be clinical, and they have to be. They can't be like, you can't be a wet blanket like me. That would just, that would not be good. I'm not advocating for that. But like, there's clinical for the sake of getting the job done and doing a good job. And then there's this guy, which is a psychopath. And the clinical element was then make me think of like Criminal Minds, if you've ever seen an episode of that, which is a very dark show. But they talk about how, like, you know, with certain unsubs, with the different serial killers that they're going after, how different things make them tick. And I was sitting here thinking, like, nothing would make this guy tick. Like, certain serial killers, they love to hear you scream.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this guy wouldn't care if you stopped. He'd find it more peaceful to continue working. It's not like he gets turned on by the screams, but also the screams wouldn't stop him. Your silence won't stop him. Like, he's so in after a certain result, a certain experimental outcome, that it feels like if you were to be trapped in his clutches, nothing you do is going to benefit you in any way, shape, or form. You are just in for absolute agony.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like, he didn't like being confined by any sort of rules whatsoever.
Total freedom is freedom from ethics and morals.
Yeah.
Oh.
Which is, yeah, terrifying. But even more so the fact that, like, he was cultivated this way. You know, like, the single player Nacho had said, I don't know how long they had been watching the Doctor for, but clearly he was sought out for this reason. And, like, oh, those poor other students that were just, like, in this experiment, that sucks. But I also think that no matter what, he would have gone into devolved into some kind of path this way, even if it wasn't, like, pushed and triggered a little bit more by the Black Ops operation. He was headed this way into some sort of serial killer type of role with it. So this just, I think, like, fast tracked it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it facilitated it. It gave him probably greater access to victims.
Mm-hmm.
But he was always going to be this person.
Yeah.
And, you know, they point out how, like, messing with dead animals, torturing animals, like, that always is the precursor to this.
Mm.
And I think that's absolutely true. And I think even kids who may not know, like, that fact per se, there's always that knowledge that, like, when somebody is hurting something and seems to be enjoying it, that there's something wrong with their brain. Like, I think even kids will give that other child distance just because that's not normal. Children are naturally very empathetic and very kind-hearted to each other. Yes, kids can be dicks to each other. I'm not disputing that. But, like, when it comes to torture like this, that is just something that there's a screw loose in your brain if you're doing it. And so I think kids naturally will distance themselves from that child.
Let us know what you thought about this down below in the comments. And if you want all of our Dead by Daylight reactions, check out the description of this video. We got a playlist there for you. And if you want early ad-free access to our videos, check out the link for our Patreon down below in the description of the video.
You can check out Destiny that I mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much for checking out our reaction for Dead by Daylight, the Doctor lore, full backstory, but just keep in mind
that our reaction is definitely not definitive.